What's next for me is to take all this information, the work I've been doing in the seminar on money, the work I've been doing on the markets, and to bring it together in a way that lets people know that there is a path, there are a set of skills to be attained in the learning and mastery of this work. So, what is money? The research is in. There's now an entire field. It's known as behavioral economics. It's also known as behavioral finance. And what they have found, to no one's surprise here in this room, is that people are not necessarily rational decision makers with money. Moreover, they're very often not rational, but curiously enough, they are systematic. And so they have a whole list of all these ways that we trip over ourselves making decisions regarding money, and then tell you, well, don't do that. Even though, of course, we usually discover we did it after we're leaving the store or whatever it was we were deciding. Well, I'm here to tell you there is a system behind it, and we will be exploring that system, how it works, and how you in your individual lives can work it. So, to be completely clear, this is not a money-making seminar. Okay, you're still here. Not directly, anyway. It's not a money advice seminar. Again, the research is in that people can get what they call financial literacy. That you can learn about bonds and stocks and real estate and the rest. You can have that knowledge and apparently still make very poor decisions. So we're talking about a different kind of education, developing a different ability than people think they need to develop. I'm going to demonstrate something to you. And I'll tell you right now, even though you'll find it disturbing, and that is that money is not real. I told you to find it disturbing. It's not, well, let me put it another way. It's not out there in the world, or more specifically, it's not only out there in the world. That money is as much in our imagination as it is in our pockets or our pocketbooks. That is, money is more than one thing. And yet, when we think of it as something, then we think about, well, how can I get more of it? How can I save it? How can I use it more wisely? And that certainly is knowledge to have. But money is more than that, and I think most of you know that. If you think about the social and psychological factors. Social factors, for example, money is used to determine status in our world. Psychological factors, that it's a pleasure to have money. But curiously, it can be a pain or distress for the money you don't have. And that's a demonstration that it is, in a sense, in your imagination as much as anywhere else. I will demonstrate that money gets into all, or at least most aspects of our lives. And as again, some of you may know that. But even if you know about these social and psychological factors, and you start to ask questions, well, what's important to me about money? You start to think about work-life balance. It matters to you how you get the money. But even then, you're still thinking it's outside of you. So let's clear that up right now. Money is a substance, but it's also a sign, a symbol, a cipher, a story, a ritual, and an abstraction, all at the same time. So if it's just a substance, then we only have so many choices that we can do with it. But as we understand the larger worlds in which money operates, then we will have more freedom to deal with it in new and different ways. If there is any so-called secret of wealth in this seminar, it's that the real foundations of money are hidden. And not only do people not talk about them, until very recently, people didn't know how to talk about them. But we're going to be doing that today. When you master a field, and the practices, the knowledge, and the names. So, for example, engineering, Depending on the kind of engineering, you learn the details, the distinctions of something. You learn the processes involved, and you learn the names of those because it makes it easier to talk to with your colleagues and to remember. So you learn the language of engineering, just like you could learn the language of medicine or the language of marketing and so forth. And people think they learn the language of money, but they're usually only learning a subsection of it. They're learning the language of real estate, or they're learning the language of finance, and that these are not the language of money. In fact, money has its own language, and most of us speak it unconsciously. And we don't realize that we may be just using a few phrases of that knowledge, a few phrases of that language, which keep taking our attention back to those same small set of choices. Okay, this is a bit of academic aside. Every novel of the 19th century is about money. Charles Dickens famously wrote many novels that involved money. There was one, Dombey and Son. And this is the story. He was a businessman, successful businessman in London, and his small son of 5. Papa, what is money? And his father's thinking, well, I'd like to explain to him about currency depreciation and bond terms and so forth. And he thinks, no, my son is 5. So he says, shilling, guinea, pence, pennies, gold, silver, money. And the son goes, yes, I know, Daddy, but what does money mean? And his father thinks, well, money is something that you can do things in the world. You'll be powerful. You can do more of what you want. And his son looks and says, but Papa, money didn't save Mama from dying, and I know that I am weak, and money hasn't made me strong. Money isn't cruel, is it? And that's just a little example of how there are multiple meanings of money. And what money is called points people at certain things. Bread, lettuce, gravy. These are different words for money. Skins, and then later on that became, do you have skin in the game? Meaning, do you have money in this deal? So in your native language, what are some of the other words for money? What is it causing you to unconsciously associate money with? If you associate money with bread, that's food, that's survival, that's pretty important. What comes to mind when you think of money? In linguistics, there's a difference between a sign and a symbol. A sign means one thing, like a stop sign. And if I had any money, is that money? It's not money. Let's see if I got any money. This is what money looks like. And again, I just pause here because it's an act of imagination. And I'm a smart guy, I'll go, not money here, this is money. This would maybe work, but this will work easier. Or maybe not from what I'm seeing. Now, the sign, the number, means one thing, just like the stop sign. It doesn't have any other meanings. But a symbol has multiple meanings on multiple levels. A symbol has a big idea or ideas that it condenses into that symbol that you can see or say. And a symbol contains and explains a contradiction or a paradox. And all of these are happening at once. So money condenses this idea and something else. Symbols are made of metaphor. For over 100 years, people have been noticing this about money, that money is first and foremost a metaphor. Now, what difference does that make? And what can you do with it? Money is a medium of exchange. Money is a measure of value. Money is a store of value. And there's sometimes a fourth one, which basically says money can be paid for debts later, which is the same thing as this with time. And this is the way that Charles Dickens' character, Mr. Dombey, was thinking, in economic theory. And meanwhile, his little son Paul has noticed that money has other effects in the world. He says, and money isn't cruel, is it? And it turns out that father and son represent a new theory of us. And that is that we're of two minds. And the one mind, and the mind we associate ourselves with, the mind that we went to school for 12 plus years for, well, the scientists call it System 2. We would call it the conscious mind in NLP. And this is our rational, thoughtful, deliberate thinking mind. Mostly auditory as well, step by step. This is the mind that does math. So you also know this is the mind that sometimes you have to turn off the radio. This is the mind that can get tired and you can make a mistake. This is the mind that when you get excited, it goes away, which I think is one of the reasons we spend so many years training it, because it takes time to build up this mind. Meanwhile, there's the other mind, what we would call the unconscious, and the unconscious is intuitive. We get feelings about things, or for the men in the room, a gut reaction. It's automatic, it's running all the time, and it works on patterns. So we see a situation, we make a judgment right away. We say, oh yeah, that reminds me of, if something is like something else, it's a metaphor. This mind is also very metaphoric, and it's more visual as well. And so our associations with things are made by this mind. And all our feelings and thoughts about money are processed here. And the mathematics and the finance theory are here. And the emotions are all here. And so you might now have a better understanding of how you get conflicted about money at times. And the way the two systems work is that the way the two systems work and the way most people work them is this is always running. So what we need to do is use willpower to inhibit it. But of course we run out of willpower, yeah? Now there is an alternative, and that's what's really great about your backgrounds. NLP is about educating this system, which, just so you know, most of the world still thinks is impossible. So that puts you ahead right now. So while everyone is noticing money is a substance, and they're saying the economic theory, we know some other things. We know that money's a medium exchange means money is a metaphor. That you can take money and have it stand in for almost anything else. She's a princess, metaphor. Life is a game. So life is a game, or life is a journey. And neither of those is right. But there are many things that we think life is, and that property of our minds and body, that's metaphor making. And now we have this substance in the world. We have this symbol, and if I give it to someone, they will give me stuff. That makes money a living metaphor. If your children have ever acted like money is magic, or more valuable than anything else, now you know why. They understand money is magic. It's our modern magic. And because it works almost everywhere, it's omnipresent. So it's there, but it's everywhere else too. In fact, you can do this weird thing. You can take your money to a place that there are people, and you give them your money, and they don't give you anything. And then you leave. And later on, you can be at a store or something, and you can take a piece of plastic, and they will let you take the stuff away. Think about that. You go, yeah, okay, you bought something. But these are, in any other time in history, these would be forms of magic. And my point is our System 1 has been around in all those other times. And so it sees this now, and it goes, that's magic. But the real magic is that we think it's real, because we have money as a measure of value. Well, this is easier than, say, how many chickens would I need for an iPhone? And would it make a difference if it was an iPhone or an iPhone Plus? Would I need bigger chickens, or would I need more of them? And once again, it's a silliness, but we go, okay, I can sell the chickens for so much, I get the money, and now I can get the iPhone, or whatever else. But the point is that those are not in any way equivalent. Money makes them equivalent. I mean, as a child, you learned you can't compare apples and oranges, but you can. You go to the grocery store and you see apples cost this much and oranges cost that much. You can buy like 4 oranges or 6 apples. So they take things that are unequal and they create a way of making them equal. And you're going, what is he getting at? We take the time of your life and we say that's equal to so much money and not a penny more. And because we're so used to doing it, you think that your time really is worth that. When Arnold Schwarzenegger made the Terminator movie, the second one, he was paid $128,554 a minute. Did he earn it? So if he had been a better actor, they should have paid him more? I'm getting at a couple ideas here. We consciously believe this, whereas in our system one, what we have to do is we have to objectify. We have to, you see the word object there. So we have to turn stuff into an object. It isn't that. In our imagination, we take the time of our life and turn it into hours, units to sell, or months, or whatever it is. And then we believe it's true. So we believe that we're worth so much an hour or so much a month. And we believe that an apartment is worth so much money, except that the market has fallen and the prices are actually going down. So you actually have a better experience than, say, Americans, that this actually isn't not objective, it's arbitrary, it's made up. And finally, money is a store of value, whether it's an individual bill or a bank account. There's a phrase that the Phoenician people invented money. But why so little? I mean, since they were making money, why didn't they make more? Because money has to be scarce. If everybody had lots of money, money wouldn't be worth anything. Well, money. They had that, so much inflation, these are his toys now. You think that you want to have more money, and you think as a enlightened person, everybody should have more money. But if everybody has lots of money, you have inflation. Scarcity is a property of money. Scarcity is a property of the imagination. Again, it's how you think about this that makes the difference. Now with these, and with the omnipresence of money, we start talking about the world. That we might talk about time as money, that you talk about you don't want to waste it, you're investing your time in this class, for example, your spare time, which is the time you're not making money, right? And has anybody ever told you, or have you ever heard anybody say, they should get a real job? That's about money. And think about that jobs that are real pay real money, and jobs that are unreal don't pay, or don't pay enough. And those that you know something about NLP and submodalities, you know the picture's more faded. Our even thinking about money is orienting us and having us make different kinds of connections. People talk about having a worthwhile life. They don't want to scrape by. People talk about decisions that they paid off. People talk about that they want to earn somebody's respect. That we use the money economy to make sense of our lives, our decisions, our emotions, and our relationships. Or as some of you may not want to admit you have thought, it's not worth staying in this relationship any longer. And what were you doing? You were using a money kind of measure. Meanwhile, what's money? It isn't just itself. It has, as a symbol, multiple meanings, multiple associations, bringing all these ideas together. So freedom, worthwhileness, heaven, all these things get combined And of course, one of the contradictions, I'll only give you one right now, is that while part of our mind thinks of all that, at the very same moment we think about poverty and darkness and not having enough. And so these are going on at the same time. Money can be a joy and money can be a dread. Money is freedom, but lack of money is slavery. All when I use the word or give a symbol or a sign. And while each one of these is a quality, they're also each a path to freedom. When you talk about money, even think about money, people tend to be more individual instead of working as a team. That people tend to be more tenacious, they work longer. So just the thought of money can change how you go for a goal, and it's a good insight. And of course the opposite of that is do what you love and the money will follow. But I'm a practical guy, so I ask, how far behind? The money follows too far behind, it's not really useful. All language is metaphoric, and so we have metaphors for money, we have metaphors for relationship, and we have metaphors for our identity. And these get mixed with our metaphors of money. A way of thinking about that is that the metaphor of identity, the person's metaphor, is more in the foreground. So some of you might be aware you do think of life as a journey, or that business is a game, or maybe you think that life is an artistic creation, or you may think life is a struggle, but that one's worth changing. And meanwhile, the metaphors of money can be thought of as running in the background. So if life is a struggle, then you're struggling to get money, but you may be still looking for it. That may be the struggle. Or it may be holding you back. So you can see how these begin to fold together. Now, the thing about the metaphor of identity is, once again, it comes out in people's language, in their beliefs, and the stuff they bring with them, and the environments they create. And so, you may have noticed everyone doesn't dress the same. Each of us in our own way is expressing a bit of our identity. So some of us more obviously than others. Maybe you've met the person who thinks of life as a rugged adventure, right? And they've got like the Timberline boots, blue jeans, and the flannel shirt, even when they're going to the shopping center in the city. Or someone else, it might be more subtle, that they think life is a game and like a casino, like the movie Casino with Robert De Niro, something like that. So they just kind of, with the eyes, they just look, scope out the situation. You may not want to work for these people, but you know what I'm talking about. The kind of metaphor you have in mind is shaping your behavior. And I'm saying all this as a suggestion that this evening when you go back to your home, your apartment, perhaps for a second when you've opened the door, you can pause and, who lives here? Now I know you can say, I live here, but not yet. But to look around and to see what this place and what it has says about the occupant. So for example, in my place there are many pictures, artwork, in different sizes and shapes. And you very quickly realize they are from all over the world. So when we had movers bringing in bookcases for me, the mover who was a big fellow, but a happy fellow, and they're putting the bookcases in my study. 10 floor-to-ceiling bookcases in antique mahogany, with then windows that look east towards the lake. I only tell you that because now you know something about me, right? And the mover, he finishes putting the bookcases in, and he turns to me. He says, I very much enjoy seeing your wife's art collection from her travels around the world. And I said, well, a couple of those are mine. And he goes, yeah, a couple. So I know in a way this stuff is easy. It's, as we have a fellow in the US say, he says, if you look, you can see a lot. And so I say, I offer those as a couple more examples that if you were to open your own door and then just look around at what's there, not the clutter, but because each of those things didn't arrive there by accident. And of course, a number of us live with someone else and they bring stuff in too. But still, that environment is in a sense like a physical reflection of your values, your beliefs, and your activities. And they would suggest the metaphor of identity, or metaphors, that you want to live, that you are living, that you aspire to live. Thinking of life as a battle, that's going to bring a certain kind of resources, yeah? And survival and determination. And those can be powerful resources and needed at the time. But then if all of life becomes a battle, well, then it becomes exhausting on the person. So it's what metaphor when. When people lived in one world, whether it was the church in the Middle Ages or a large institutional organization, government today, you'll find people more with one metaphor, usually having to do with the institution. So, life is war and it works in the military. But people who are outside, people who make their own life, I will see typically a pair, like for example, life is a journey, life is exploring, put those together. Or life is a book and life is learning, those two go together. And in a sense, it doesn't matter what your occupation is, because what we do is we rethink our environment in terms of the metaphor. So in the business I sometimes associate myself with, which is trading and finance, one of the fellows who's done very well for himself he says that trading and investing are a game and money is how you keep score. And not surprising, as a young man, when young men are just learning how to spend money crazily, he bought Michael Jordan's basketball shoes. And of course, you could guess that around his office, he has sports paraphernalia, but he's not even in that business. And this goes back to that idea that it's what we have in our minds, what we carry with us, that is shaping what we think, what we see, and what we do. Whether that's about relationships, marriage, life, or money. So just as a way to tune you up a bit more, because when I mention that, people go, and there are 5 metaphors for marriage. Just 5? Be good if somebody made some more. So there's unity, and unity is where we talk about my better half, like 2 halves make a whole, so you can hear that in their language. There's the idea of a partnership. We're both working on the relationship, or we're both pulling together. There's the idea of a relationship as a shelter. There's parent-child. Yes, there is. And this shows up in, President Reagan called his wife mommy. But guys, do you ever call her baby? What's that about? Not everybody does this, but this is another way that people think one person's more mature, one person's younger. And this can get inadvertently played out just because the female of our species tends to be smaller than the male. Just stand up for a moment. Yeah, a lovely height, yes. I'm taller, and so there is a cultural tendency, not to say cultural, there's a biological tendency that then to see her as younger, smaller, more immature, which is not true, of course. Okay, there's one more. Ball and chain, burden, which is the best one? There is no best. What's best is to be able to move from one to the other. Because sometimes you might need to carry or help your partner for a while, or your partner you. And sometimes you are 2 halves of something bigger, and sometimes you are both together creating something. But again, I'm just underlining this point one more time, is how you think about the world will tend to be the world you'll see and experience. To help you along, I'll give you a short example of mine. I hint here that I didn't buy a house. I would live in apartments in different places, and I've lived in Tokyo, South America. Each time I'm there, I'll build up a little research library, and I would go out. I lived in Yogi Hachiman in Tokyo. So I didn't have things like a bank account or a car or a house. And so when I was doing the research on the metaphors, I just went, well, of course not. What would an explorer do with a house? They're off exploring. So then I thought, oh wait, this is before the Indiana Jones movies. Didn't have that idea. So I thought, well, wait a minute. And oh no, I forgot to mention, I didn't really have a job. I thought, I know what, I will go and explore something, and then I'll come back and I'll lecture about it. And they'll pay me for that. And then I'll have a place to live. And then I can go explore more. I said earlier, I mentioned a contradiction in money. We enjoy its presence, but we feel even more its absence. What's that about? That's like turning to your spouse and saying, I can't wait for you to be gone so I can miss you. It's emotional we are with money, and yet it demands that we be rational. It's a substance if you have some bills, but it's a completely abstract system all around us, determining the price of things and our value and so many others. It brings up joy or dread, and it's either a debit or a credit depending on what side of the desk you're on. So I made a partial list here of some of the contradictions or paradoxes of money. I'll leave this up, but the reason for these two lines here is that the system 2 on top, usually, or not, is running sometimes. And the system 1 we have, usually on the bottom, but not always, is running all the time. And so we find ourselves cycling between these in so many different areas. Money should be rational. We should deal with it objectively. Money is abstract. So it's something in the air that you can with your credit card or your phone. But it's also something you can get pieces of paper or even metal for. Money in itself is worthless. This is intrinsic value. It's not made of anything valuable. It's not made of diamonds or platinum. It's made of paper or plastic. And yet at the same time, it's determining the worth of everything around us. Depending on our thoughts at the time, money might be dirty or clean. But whatever the time, money has the authority. I can't give you that, you don't have the money. Well, you can do that if you have the money. It's an arbitrary authority. This is worth that much and not any more. And meanwhile, that value is arbitrary. I think most of you by now know the story about diamonds are a girl's best friend. Just for the few men in the room that might not know, South African mining and jewelry company of De Beers decided that diamonds should be worth more. So they invented the diamond engagement ring. Yes, 100 years ago, women might have gotten some guarantee for their betrothed. But it would have been a valuable item, like an emerald or a ruby. And by the early advertising campaigns of De Beers, they convinced men that they had to buy women a diamond ring. Not entirely a bad idea. A number of you look really nice with diamond rings. Except they did it to increase the value of diamonds. Buying a diamond is like buying a car. As soon as you leave the shop, it's worth less than you bought it for. In case you're wondering, diamonds are not an investment. But that's just one example of the arbitrary authority of money. That is that there's the metaphoric value of the diamond, and there's what it really is, compressed carbon. See, the thing about money, it's both a sign and a symbol. It's a sign in that it tells you how much any particular bill is worth in the country of the currency you have. But that's a very small importance compared to all of its symbolic properties. You all know who Dustin Hoffman is, the actor, and Gene Hackman. Well, long ago, far away, they were young, and they had just moved to New York, both of them, to become actors. And as even is true today in the creative field, it can be tough. So it wasn't entirely surprising when Dustin called Gene Hackman. And he goes, "Gene, I don't have any money for food." And Gene said, "Oh, I don't have much money either." "Yeah, but Gene, you know, it's like I got nothing." He goes, Dustin, I'll see what I can do. So he went to a grocery store, filled a bag with all sorts of things, and walked. Save money, don't use a cab. He walked over to Dustin Hoffman's apartment. He brings it into the kitchen. Wow, this is great, thank you so much. And in the kitchen, on a shelf behind, there are a series of jars with labels on them. And the first jar says rent on it, and there's money in that jar. And the second jar has utilities, gas, electric, things like that, and there's money in that jar. And there was a jar that said entertainment, and there's money in that jar. And then on the end, there's the food jar, and it's empty. True story. And it's a fun story to tell. And it turns out this new research in economics shows that we do the same thing, even if we don't have actual jars in our kitchen. For example, they've shown that the ease with which you acquire money will affect the ease with which you spend it. Or alternatively, the difficulty with which you obtain the money will affect the difficulty with which you spend it. Or how fast you acquire it will affect how fast you spend it. Or as they say in Las Vegas, easy come, easy go. And again, this is our system one at work. If we got the money easy and quickly, then our brain is going, oh, we can spend it. And I invite you to think in your own experience whether there's anything to this or not. You have an identity card, but do you know the last 2 digits of the card? And those of you that don't, simply vividly imagine a 2-digit number. And now I'm going to ask you a question you may not know the answer to. How many African nations are there in the United Nations? And just imagine that. Okay, and how many of you thought it was under 50, right? How many thought you was over 50? Okay, now, what I'm going to suggest is where it gets strange. There's a very strong tendency that those of you that thought it was under 50, your identity number was also, the last 2 digits were also under 50. And those of you who thought that there were more than 50 African nations, your identity number was over 50. I'm going to turn this into a magic show. Now, it's not always the case, but you can see by people smiling and nodding around you, it often happens. And this is called anchoring in behavioral economics. They use the NLP word, but this is what they mean by anchoring. It means we anchor on a number even if it's irrelevant. That's the key part. The number on your ID had nothing to do with the number of African nations, but they happened close together in time, and so you put them together. Now, another version of this you might be more familiar with is that you see something you want to buy. Maybe you see an advertisement for a vacation or an article of clothing, and you see that it's on sale, 20-25% off, a good amount. And you think, I should get that, but I'm busy today. And then you go back in person or on the internet, wherever, and now it's not on sale anymore. Do you buy it? No. Why not? Because you've got this number in your head that's reminding you it was cheaper before. I'd like to leave you with the words of the philosopher Eric Gill. He says, to eat cheap ice cream is a sin, because the purpose of ice cream is pleasure, and to eat cheap ice cream simply because it costs less, of course, is to deny the very reason you're eating ice cream. Well, what are your thinking skills? And once again, here's where we dive into more detail. Because there are several qualities about things. There's the qualities of size and shape and color. There's the qualities of number. Today, right now, we want to concentrate on the qualities of ownership. And even among them, there are several skills, several abilities. I would list at least 5. Some people list 3. But the point is that there's more detail. So you can acquire things. You might be good at acquiring things. Maybe you do so as antiques, or art, or jewelry, or maybe even different kinds of experiences like restaurants. And then there's your ability to value those things. Like, do you value them for themselves, because they're beautiful, because they're unique, because they're interesting, or even for money? And then there's the skill of trading in those things, exchanging them for something else, knowing where they sit among other different kinds of similar things, exchanging them. And then there's the skill of keeping things. Maybe you keep them beautiful, never touch them. Maybe you use them every day. Maybe you keep them in very good condition. Maybe you don't care and you leave them out in the rain. And at least in this particular system, there's finally, how do you dispose of them? Do you put them on eBay? Do you give them away? Do you sell them? Just throw them away? And so forth. Now here's the thing. Each of these are also a set of skills. And it's likely that you're actually good at one or more of these skills while you're focusing on another one. For instance, some of you, in terms of money, might not be good at acquiring it, but you're really good at trading it and disposing of it. You got talent there, you got experience. Or it might be that you're very good at valuing things once you have them, but you're not so good at disposing of them. And your house is beginning to fill up with stuff. Yeah, you see how this works? So the first set of thoughts to have is, how are you with things? Multiple meanings, multiple levels that are condensed into an image, an idea, explains and resolves contradictions. And as a symbol, it can capture the human imagination and focus it. And we've been changing that focus over these 2 days so far. One of the focuses, and I describe it hypnotically, but you could just think of it as a focus, a belief. It's in the original idea of money, that money is a measure. And pretty soon it starts to measure everything in the world. I didn't think of that. Karl Marx wrote extensively on this side, and people before him. And one of the things they talk about, especially the gold bugs, is that there are intrinsic currencies and there are extrinsic currency. That is, there is money that is actually worth something in itself. You could melt it down. Basically, it doesn't matter. Melt it down or not, it's the same value. Because gold and silver, the value of the coin is based on the weight. And an extrinsic currency is the paper is not worth very much, even as a bookmark. You would take that one, but what would you do with this one? It's Ukrainian. I got this from my banker. These will be souvenirs in Chicago. I can't even take these to the bank. And this same idea of intrinsic value and extrinsic value, it slips over into other things like us. We spoke a great deal earlier about valuing your time, how much per hour or per month. But that supposes that the money is what's valuable, and you're the one that has to prove that you're worth the money. That is, that it's outside of you. And I would propose that at this point, especially after your rapprochement with money, that the wealth is not outside you. The wealth is inside you. Now, this is an attitude that I see in very wealthy people. They are not afraid to start over. And sometimes they've had to when their entrepreneurship or their trading goes down. But they know that the skills and abilities are in them. The ability to make money isn't in the money, it's in them. So they're the intrinsic currency, the actual gold. And I would propose that that's also true of each of you. Now, what is that made of? Well, keep in mind, again, that money these days is most often just made of paper and ink. It's the ideas it brings up that make it powerful. And I would propose that in you, those are your skills, but more specifically, the kinds of skills that you don't think anything of because they're so easy. To redirect somebody's thinking, to organize some people to do something, to gather different things together, to comfort a family member. And also your abilities, your wealth is in who you know. Not just as business connections, but, and again, I got this from one of these traders, one of these wealthy people. You realize there are people in your life who are rooting for your success. A family member, a friend, a colleague, and they're on your cheering team and you didn't even think. And right now, if you needed something, you know they would try to help, they would help. And that's part of your creativity, that's part of your resources. And there is your imagination, even if you're embarrassed to tell me some of the things you think, also a source of wealth. And so in these and so many ways, you have a great mine of gold within you. Now, a technique that I've shared in one of the evening sessions is that this one fellow, every time he accomplished something, he would add it to a list, so that he had an ongoing and growing list of his accomplishments. And this could include the conventional kinds of successes that we have in life. I just want to read something here that was written in 1965. It was shortly after the dinosaurs died. And this is from an anthropologist, and she writes, she's Mary Douglas, is money mediates transactions, so money's between transactions. She says ritual mediates experience, and money is a link between the present and the future, so does ritual. The more we reflect on the richness of the metaphor, the more it becomes clear this is no metaphor. Money is only an extreme and specialized kind of ritual. And I remember the little girl counting out her dollars one by one. And the fellow who's quoting it, the title of this article is, "And All Shall Worship Money." If money is now society's religion, then are economists the clergy? After all, credo and credit. And it turns out a number of people have been noticing this. And to quote Mr. Carl Jung, when collective representations, ideas like a master story, like money, when these are wandering about, are involved, he says their place is immediately taken up by all sorts of private idiocies, idiosyncrasies, mania, phobia, and demons. What he means is, be careful what you believe, because you know what's going on now. And while there may be people all around you who are members of that church, you can now decide your own relationship and your own future and your own community for what will be in your hearts and your lives. And someday, let's meet again and exchange some stories about where this has all taken you. Thank you very much. Thank you.